Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. This is your brother Lawrence, and today I have a very interesting video to share with you, and the video is about the upcoming General Conference session. In fact, we are very close, very close to the session, and there are some conversations about the agenda of the session. I'm going to share this particular one with you, and friends, you are going to love it. Very interesting conversation. Very interesting. So, at the end of the video, I would like you to share your thoughts about the issue that was discussed. All right. Let me know your thoughts in the comments after the video. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, because I am going to share with you updates about the session. Everything that you need to hear before the session, everything that you need to hear during the session, and everything that you need to hear after the session are all going to be shown and discussed right here on this channel. So please, if you have not clicked on that subscribe button down there, you can do so right now. Just hit the subscribe button and press the notification bell so that you don't miss any of the videos we publish. Now, with that being said, let's get right into the video. Please listen to the discussion about the agenda of the General Conference session. Let's watch this video, friends.
Whenever you have a large group like a GC session that's going to do things that they consider too trivial, then they give it to the executive committee. They have these subcommittees that actually do it. That's stuff that you should do at spring and fall council. You should do the more menial tasks at those councils and the more important tasks at general conference session.
The most important thing should be a general conference session.
Yes.
Because that's where you have the widest representation of the global church. And so I hear you there.
Well, it's the most important body. It should have the most important issues, period.
Yeah, I agree. So there's some things that I know that a lot of people want to be on the agenda, which are not on the agenda. The number one thing, obviously, would be something about the 2015 and 2021 vaccination statements. And there are literally about 100 churches that have in conferences and even unions. I think the Australian Union the other day, or maybe I'm off by a notch, but anyway, there's some rather large segments of the church even at this point that have voted to ask the General Conference to reconsider those documents. And this is what you tried to do last time. And I think one of the 25,000 or 24,000 signatures you had on your document was mine. So you were my intercessor, and you failed. But anyway, you tried. But that is the giant item which I believe is not on the agenda, which I don't believe they're going to allow it on the agenda if they can in any way prevent it from being there, from being added to the agenda. So I do want to talk about that for a few minutes here before we go into some of the other things that maybe ought to be on the agenda or could be added to the agenda.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that, but I want to preview that with saying I don't think that's the most important thing anymore. I think it's really important, but I think in the process of us working through that, we have come across things that are even more important.
So tell us, what do you think is, in your opinion, is maybe more important?
Well, so one of the things that I've tried to do is I've tried to talk to people that maybe traditionally might, I think, disagree with me, and I want to get their opinion. And I want to understand what concerns them, and what's been a common theme. Whether I'm talking to someone who's in a much more liberal part of the church that maybe I wouldn't normally, because I hate these terms liberal and conservative, because I know that certain aspects of me would probably be viewed as liberal by some parts of the church, and other parts of the church would view me as incredibly conservative. And so it's like, I don't think these terms really, but for lack of any other term that we can come up with, I talk to different people. And one of the recurring themes that occurs over and over and over again is authoritarianism. And what we see right now is a lot of authoritarianism coming out of the General Conference leadership. And so that concerns a lot. Now,
So when you say authoritarianism, let's be real simple. What do we mean by authoritarianism?
Well, okay, so the vaccine statements are a real good symptom of that. The fact that we can't discuss it, they don't want us to discuss it, the fact that they refuse to discuss, the General Conference refused to have any kind of public discussion whatsoever with anyone who was opposed to their statements. Just wouldn't happen, just none.
So you're talking about active suppression of discussion.
Yes, absolutely, active suppression of discussion. And we saw as people wanted to have more and more discussion and things started to ratchet up, and we started to realize it became much more of a thorn in your side that you couldn't even talk about it. And that's the real reason why we ended up with the whole debacle with Conrad Vine and Pastor Kelly, because of the complete and utter lack of discussion. And that's just a huge symptom. And then, okay, so that's a big problem. Another big problem that people have been realizing is they started to look back and go like, well, what about the other statements? I've been looking at those statements before, but it really hadn't hit home with me or with anybody else exactly just how problematic these are. And we started to see how they kind of play out, because we could see our church appear to be pandering to other interests, non-spiritual interests, when our church really should only be following one interest, and that's God. And yet we seem to be pandering to the United Nations, to our government, places where we received money. And we have the appearance of that. Now, I think in these matters, the appearance is just as important as the reality. And if there's a real appearance of it, well, then you got to change. It doesn't matter whether there's truth or falsehood to it. But I think it's more than just appearances. I think that the reality is we are pandering. It's been going on for quite a while. And so that led us to we see these other kinds of things, with these other statements and everything. But like you said, you also have these statements about the vaccine, and that led to this Project Pearl, where the church business meeting became a vehicle used to try to counter this, which I really support. I really think this is a great idea, because one of the things it does is it forces the members to think about what they really believe and what they're really willing to stand for and not stand for. And I think that that's an important character development. And so I'm in favor of all of the churches having to go through a business meeting where they discuss what they believe, because we can discuss at the general conference session what we believe in the 28 fundamental beliefs or whatever, but that doesn't allow the church member to engage in that kind of discussion, which I think is an important discussion, especially as we know in the future where it's going to be harder and harder to stand for what you believe.
We have these actual statements that are going to be problematical when we are working to win new members to the church. I mean, if I come back from the store and I here comes somebody I want to talk to, and I take very quickly and I poke my burrito into my pocket because I don't want them to see the burrito, and they say, "Pardon me, but is that a burrito sticking out of your pocket?" Like the UN statement or some of these 50 or 60 statements we have that are really, they're hanging on the Adventist Church website for the World Church. You got to address it. It's like, well, yeah, okay, there's a burrito hanging in my pocket, but the only thing
you've got things like the climate change statements and the sustainable development statements. Look, these programs, first of all, it's highly debatable, the climate change issue. Highly debatable. And if you would just be honest, you can look back and you can see how science has changed. It went from global chilling to global warming. And then they went to climate change because they couldn't defend one way or the other. And so it's just one thing after another. And the sustainability goals, that's become kind of a globalist buzzword for the West. And it's kind of something that's used to, force certain kinds of policies on Western governments that maybe don't want it, but at the same time, it forces policies on the developing world that they don't want. Right. And you start to wonder what's really going on here, especially when you got big countries that are totally cheating on this stuff.
There's too many people who we would want to join the church who might stand up and say, "Hey, by the way, I like your church. I believe in the Sabbath. It's biblical. Everything you've shown me is biblical. What's going on with these statements about climate change? And I don't want to join a church that's connected to that. And you know what? And then we have a burden we have to overcome because frankly, we're stuck with that. It's the burrito hanging out of the pocket. It's there.
Yeah, well,
So I think
silence
it's an
is
evangelistic
golden.
impediment to have these statements. We should remove them. Certainly, two or three that I put first in line for target practice, but I probably get rid of all of them. But anyway, that's
Well, why
I'm
do we
trying to
need
think
any
how
of
we
them?
got here. We're talking about authoritarianism.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Am I back? Yes.
Well, you disappeared momentarily. All right,
Sorry
so you're
about
there.
that.
So authoritarianism is a broader issue, maybe bigger than the other one. Apparent authoritarianism. And like I said, even whether it's intentional or it's the appearance of authoritarianism, either way, it sort of has the same bad smell. So that's an issue that somehow we could work to ameliorate. When we're getting all together as a global body, we got representation from all over the world. Anything else you want to bring up there, or?
Oh yeah, I could go down the list. I mean, so related to that is why should there be any GC? Why should there be any official church statement that's not made at GC session? All those statements, like we just talked about that though.
Right.
With the authoritarianism, one of the things that's going on that's kind of weird is like, how come all the more important issues are discussed at fall council and spring council and not at GC session? And what really should be the role and the relationship of these councils to the GC session? They're supposed to be subsidiary councils that do the work that the GC can't do in session, but instead they've taken on the bigger, more important issues. And then they leave nothing for the GC in session to do. And it just doesn't seem right. And I'm wondering, there's the conspiratorial part of me that says maybe that's done for political reasons because you can control the outcome at a GC, at a spring or a fall session better than at a GC session. But I don't know. But
Even Pilate had an escape clause. Look, okay, whatever you think about Jesus, listen, I let go of one guy a year. How about I just let go of Jesus this time? What do you say? We could have at least one slot, just one maybe, for an item that's not on the agenda that we could drop in there. That would be, at least we'd be up to Pilate's level.
Well, I have a solution, and we could go through these different things, but I could talk about my solution too right now.
Well, let's come to your solution, but let's maybe just rip through some of the other items that we could have on the agenda. If we're going to,
we could talk about the relationship of church entities. So there's a really interesting reality, and that is there's a lot of church entities, and I kind of put that with air quotes, church entities that use the name Adventist or some derivation of it, like Advent, but they're not really part of the church. And you'll watch, they aren't going to be making reports, at least they didn't at the last GC session that I was at. And these are going to be things like Adventist Health, Advent Health, things like that. And you can see also, we'll probably get an ADRA report, but this is another thing that's kind of same, but kind of separate, So what should be the relationship of these entities to the government and quasi-government bodies? In other words, what should be the relationship of ADRA to the United Nations? What should be the relationship of our hospital system to the governments that fund them? Because the reality is our hospital systems are very heavily funded by government, and we see them acting in a way that's just the same as a secular system, and it becomes harder and harder to see a distinction between our health system and any other health system. And so at what point do we not even use the name anymore? Maybe we should consider taking the name away. What do you do when you're receiving USAID funds or UN funds? I was just in a foreign country and I met the ADRA director there, and he was talking to some other people, and he said that 65% of his funds for that country came from the United Nations. And I think to myself, okay, this has got the same non-proselytizing rules on it as USAID money that we've heard about. What's the purpose of this? And why do we even want to put the name Adventist on it? Because we're not doing the work of Adventists. We're doing some kind of humanitarian thing to further a UN goal, which isn't necessarily popular throughout the world. So why use the names? What about, like, we talk about church policies, church issues with really hot things like LGBTQ and different things like that. But what about these other entities? What about the hospital system? Should they follow church policy? Should we have more defined church policy? Do we need to talk more about
They have
what our
Adventist name on it if they are not operating according to Adventist belief.
Yeah, well, some of them aren't. If you saw some of the things that happen in some of our big institutions, you'd see a lot of rainbows and different things going on. A lot more things than just moral support. Maybe some medical procedures, things like that. And so we got that. But I was talking about religious liberty. Maybe the GC session should actually talk about what the needs and goals are for our religious liberty department, instead of just having a director that's kind of rubber stamped through the nominating process. Maybe the GC session needs to talk about what we really care about. I could go on. Why shouldn't there be some kind of a FOIA system? Why are the working policies of the church, which are as big as phone books, confidential? You can't get a copy of them. You don't know how the union operates. You don't know how the North American division operates. You don't know how the GC operates, because they won't give you the document. Now, some of these have leaked out through the internet and places like that, but officially you're not supposed to have it. Why do we have a church that runs that way? And how can anyone at the GC session even have oversight of a church that its primary working policies are all secret? It's not possible.
FOIA is Freedom of Information Act.
Yes.
You're referring to. So you're saying, and I think this is a really big item, transparency in the church. There should be no secret. I'm not saying there should be no secret meetings. Obviously there are unique kinds of cases where you really do need to have some privacy. But I think this is surely it's dramatically overly used. And for the basic operation of the church, in almost every respect, our meetings should be transparent and open. We shouldn't operate in any kind of secrecy.
What we do in trial courts, what we do in trial courts is we say, well, if you want to have secret information, that's fine. You can't base anything we do in court on that secret. If you want us to make our decision based on your secrets, you have to reveal your secrets. And so there needs to be a way, there should be some kind of a FOIA, and there needs to be some kind of a fair play thing where there's none of this, well, I have superior knowledge than you do, so we're going to go this way.
Right.
You can't have that kind of a thing. That isn't the way God operates. He says, come, let us reason together.
When it's done in secret, you're asking for trouble. You're just like automatically putting yourself on a conveyor belt to the wrong place.
And who does Christ says loves the dark? The wicked.
All right, friends, let's pause it right here. In fact, that was a very interesting conversation. Very, very interesting. And I believe that you also have something to share in the comments. All right, so do that right now. You can share your thoughts in the comments, even though we are talking about the present issue, right, in the church right now. Now, they spoke about authoritarianism. They also spoke about GC association with worldly organizations like the UN and others. All right. But my question is, would the General Conference leaders actually include authoritarianism as part of the agenda, 2025 GC agenda? I don't think so. And do you also think that they are going to discuss the immunization statement and other sensitive issues in the church today? Unless someone brings all of them up in other matters, the leaders of the church are not going to even mention them at all at the session. They are not going to discuss, they are not going to mention, friends, take it from me. If somebody does not bring these up in other matters, they are not going to discuss anything about the sensitive issues, immunization statements, and others. And I want to state that this is from my personal observation, or this is my personal thoughts, all right? I want to say that this 2025 session, in this session, the leaders of the church, especially those at the highest level of the church, like the GC level, are going to avoid the discussion of sensitive issues. Yes, because I think the previous session also had something like that. They avoided certain topics to be discussed at the session. All right, and so this session too is going to witness the same. Some topics will never be allowed to be discussed at the session. Period. So, friends, we are here as reporters. Yes, that is what basically I do. We are here as reporters, and everything that we will see, everything that we will hear at the session, we are going to make them known to you, all right, through this channel. We're going to report on them. We're going to comment on them. Now, before I go, please let me know in the comments what you would like the leaders at the GC session to discuss, all right? You know, there are some that says they should discuss authoritarianism. There are some that says they should discuss the immunization statements. There are some that says they should discuss like other things. What do you want the leaders to discuss at the 2025 General Conference session? Your opinion or your thoughts matters. So put that in the comments, friends. This is all that I had to share with you today. Thanks for watching. See you next time. God bless.